Welcome, guys. It's a new episode of Business Meets Life, and today it is Friday. So we have amazing Johannes Paul Lehmann with us. It's home office day. That's why we're meeting outside winter in Shanghai. Hey, why not? How are
Yeah,
you today?
doing all right. I mean, it's a good lunch break meetup, like just leaving my work computer upstairs, finished the meeting, and now meeting you to talk a little bit about life in Shanghai and like my kind of journey over here.
Wonderful. So, how does a German like you end up in China? What's your story, Johannes?
Well, long story short, I came when I was 23 years old, kind of on the behest of my father, who kindly told me to stay in China, or not, let's say to go to China, since he had some earlier on ties with Chinese Academy of Sciences, and so on and so forth. But actually, before that, even I always my father's place stayed in his Chinese room, where he had all like Chinese furniture, Chinese clothing, like general like calligraphy, paintings, whatsoever. I mean, he's been
Really?
coming to China since the 80s, basically. So always kind of was a lot in touch with China, and then his Chinese partners from Chinese Academy of Sciences came over, and so on and so forth. That's why it was kind of like a needed to happen, and to say it like this in the end. But yeah, like started off in the gaming industry before then actually joining China as product manager for some stuff.
That's interesting. So I'm wondering because I don't know many people, especially us Germans, who have so much like Chinese influence from an early age in your life. Did your dad also influence you to start learning Chinese back in Germany from an early age, or did you learn it in China?
Well, that was more like an intrinsic motivation. So he had these kind of learning Chinese books from the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So like I looked into that stuff a little bit. It was a bit geeky in school at that stage during A level, so I did that on the side. But then, of course, later in uni times, I had a proper Chinese teacher, like a Chinese professor, a funny guy who was like very much about German opera and singing lots of German songs with us in class, and then love to do the beer drinking and all that stuff. Yeah, but that was the early on Chinese education, learning whatever stories of Germany.
That's amazing. Now let's talk about Shanghai lockdown. Some of you guys may know I didn't have a very positive Shanghai lockdown story where my friends and I were COVID positive. And well, that's a different story.
Um,
And I think that Johannes actually has a very positive, a different kind of story to tell than all of my friends and me. So, what's your Shanghai lockdown story?
yeah, well, I mean, of course, Shanghai lockdown was bad for everybody, but basically, back then, I just shortly before the Shanghai lockdown moved together with my girlfriend.
Ooh.
We've at this stage we've been dating for like I don't know 8 months, something around that time, and like we saw the signs of the times, and then drove my car to Costco, like filled it properly with lots of meat and lots of champagne. You name it, like a really big shopping spree at Costco. And then basically, once the actual lockdown came, we enjoyed it quite nicely with some champagne Fridays, steak Sundays, and so on and so forth. But I mean, this being said, it still was a tough time because
Yeah.
essentially everybody or nobody could leave their homes, and food was scarce. And my company, what I said, they started sending out food packages to employees because obviously there were people who were starving in their homes because they were just used to buying daily their necessities and so on. But yeah, like and things happen, of course, and then my wife fell pregnant, or like at this stage,
Get pregnant.
at this stage wasn't pregnant yet, or not my wife yet. That's what I mean. And then so we ended up the lockdown. Being driven by the neighborhood committee in hazmat suits to the clinic in order to do all the kind of maternity checkups and all that stuff.
Like
And
during the Shanghai
yeah,
lockdown,
yeah,
you were able.
we were able. I mean, it needed some negotiation with the neighborhood committee, and of course, we dressed up completely in these white hazmat suits, and then had this special like neighborhood committee pass that was waving us through all the street, or like there was a lot of road closures, and that was like the beginning of that experience. And of course, later that led to us marrying and having now a beautiful 13 months old little baby daughter, basically.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So, how has your life shifted now from um, the formerly single man and then the happenings in Shanghai during the lockdown? Now you are married, even you have a child. Like, how's life changed for you?
Well, I mean, it's a significant change. having a baby, because obviously you have different wake up times. You have some little human being that basically depends on you for everything. So that of course was a shift. But I mean, luckily work wise, it was good that I have at this stage reached a point in my career where I kind of could take more time off. Like, of course, we had generous the paternity leave as well, but also like the general.
Wait, you have German paternity leave
No,
even in China?
no. It's Chinese paternity leave, but then
Oh.
there's these added local regulations for like added paternity leave, and then we have marriage leave on top, and then also we have these flexible working hours, so we can we how to call it? It's like this core working time where we can leave, let's say at 4 p.m. And then like
Oh.
that meant basically I could go home even before my wife went home from work to bring baby to bed, and then of course China is easy with like a I setup, like you have your nanny that takes care of the baby. We even went so far to have a proper like confinement lady for 1 month, which
Wow.
by itself was quite an experience. You know, like having a Chinese human being living with you 24/7, only taking care of the baby, but then also cooking everything for mama and dad. And yeah, quite interesting.
Mhm.
Like it was pretty much like a Beijing confinement lady. Is a little bit rough around the edges, the typical hairstyle, and all the Chinese opera songs and so on and so forth. Yeah,
Oh wow, that sounds interesting.
yeah.
Now, a lot of like local expats or foreigners here in Shanghai normally get married to local women. I think your wife is not Chinese because normally, I mean, what would happen then is like the parents would move in with you, or the
Yeah,
parents would take care of your child, right?
yeah.
But you have your eye. Where's your wife from originally?
Well, she's Australian, from Newcastle near Sydney, and I mean, I have an Australian passport as well, so it's not too foreign to me in the end. But yeah, you have a point. Like usually for then these mixed families, so they very often have a lot of childcare kind of duties taken over by the parents, where now we need to rely on that nanny and the confinement lady. And funny, like, since I speak more Chinese than my wife, I mean, she barely speaks anything. I was then basically in the role to manage the whole household, manage different workers, whatever how you want to call them, which
Mhm.
was also an interesting experience by itself.
Wow, that is interesting. Which now brings me to the next question. Number one, again, that's German asking. Paternity leave in China does not mean you get like what 2 months off. Is this just 1 day or
It's
like
10 days.
10 days?
Yes.
But this only happens if you work for a German multinational
No, I
company in
mean,
China,
to
or
be fair, it's public policy. But
it
now,
is?
yeah, exactly.
I
So
didn't know.
it's national policy. But now what happened actually, I mean, of course, the Chinese government would like to encourage people to have more babies. So like a lot of big local cities kind of came up with additional paternity leave. So for instance, for Shanghai, if you have a below 3 years old child, you get 5 days extra in paternity leave. So
So
that
you would have 15 days then.
exactly. And then of course on top of it, we had marriage leave, which was 10 days.
Really?
So then that obviously stacks up in terms of annual leave, and then of course then talking about additional annual leave, we also have like quite a good setup with the annual leave with over 20 days. Then you have national holidays on top, these 15 days, and so on. So we could do like quite some nice time together with baby to see the in-laws in Australia, or then even do like a nice summer trip, basically.
Wow. So China is not as bad as people would think, where people work non-stop, although life here is still not easy.
Yeah. Yes.
Uh, so how do you then manage now family, your work, baby, wife, but at the same time, I always see you like he's super active on LinkedIn. You should start following him. And he's like at all of these events all the time and here and there contributing, which is amazing. How do you manage all of that? What's your secret to balancing like well-being and life and work beyond of you having a nanny?
Yeah, I mean, the things definitely changed that I don't go out to party anymore. So like,
Mm.
okay, when I lived the early days in Beijing, like when I lived a few years there, like I was constantly going for clubbing and like those typical German techno parties. And now
Oh,
just
really? I miss those. Dang
yeah,
it.
yeah. But anyway, now times have changed, so it's more like it's quiet weekends with my wife and baby, basically. Like now we can do cycle tours with the little one, or we do like exhibitions and that stuff. And then the good thing is about these most of these networking events, where I now get invited to. So it's not like something where I have to pay to get in, but I'm on the invitation list. So somebody like spends money on me and gives me free food.
VIP.
Yeah, whatever. And this is usually happening during the week. So then my wife is home like from work. She brings baby to bed, and then I go to these networking events. So this kind of is a nice shift. And of course, I started to drink less alcohol over the time, so to just be able to sustain that pace, let's say that you have. Of course, having a baby is a different pace, but then if you want to pick up a pace on, let's say, career growth, personal branding, you said it with LinkedIn, you still need to work out how to structure your energy accordingly, basically.
So this is about energy management in Shanghai, super fast moving and
Exactly.
living in big cities. I mean, we actually could literally go out drinking every night. There's an event, there's a networking event with free flow packages. It is crazy actually.
Yeah. I mean, and it's over the years. As I said, I'm now almost 10 years here. I've seen a lot of people kind of losing themselves a little bit of that over that, or like sustaining that all only for like 6 months at a time, and then you suddenly didn't see them at all anymore because
Now, tell me a bit more. What do you mean, like you see people losing themselves here? Because I've heard this before. Like, what does it mean, and why do they lose themselves, or who or how? Can you explain this a bit more?
I mean, what I have seen was that people just
Are we
really.
talking about foreigners?
I'm talking about foreigners because I mean, local Chinese is still a different thing. Like they have different kind of family structures and then a lot of social pressures to kind of act according to the local rules. But like what I've seen was a lot of foreigners who basically did what you just said, free flow package every day of the week, and then kind of didn't sustain that very long. I mean, I'm not saying they're all burned out, but they all reached at some point, like let's say a saturation point where they couldn't go any further. That usually the people that I've seen that sustain the long term, let's say, growth trajectory in China, like the 10 plus years people, they all at some point found a structure where they really prioritized what to do and what to focus on instead of just being every day out, every day meeting people, which might not bring them themselves actually proper benefits, basically.
Yeah. Wow, thanks for mentioning this. So now looking at China, how it's developing. I mean, nowadays we do see that a couple of German factories, companies are leaving China. We have a lot of fears, political risk. I just checked the news numbers from the survey from the AHK, like the chamber, and so on. What do you see? Like, what do you think? You personally would stay how much longer in China? And
I mean, first things first, everybody is kind of talking about this. What's the next China?
yeah.
Next China is still China. If you look into the forecast, because like even if you have in China, let's say 3 or 4% growth, it's still a higher growth than you would have in other more mature markets.
Like in Germany.
Negative growth, yeah, or even Southeast Asia to some extent. Like it's limited markets, and then I talk to some people like they're also very particular. So it might not be that amount of growth just talking about market size we would see like overall sales wise in China, for instance. So this is the thing. Of course, there are political risks. There's a lot of things on the radar. But personally, for me speaking, I would call it a few more years. Of course, everybody that I talk to now talks about lily pads and what to do.
What is lily pads?
Like different kind of locations globally where you set up your home base to just quickly do a jump if whatever happens. Let's say another Shanghai lockdown, whatever. I'm working on that as well, like a lot of other people, but I haven't made the clear decision yet to really make the move, basically.
Interesting. Now let's talk a little bit further on. A lot of people are dreaming of working for multinational companies, especially like here in China. If it's a foreign company, do you have some advice for people who want to join an amazing company like another multinational company? Because I remember having grown up in Stuttgart, being surrounded by everybody was dreaming to work for them.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, these the times where you come as a foreigner and you easily get a job are somewhat over. But they're not entirely over. So if you do your work well and do a lot of networking, you might find a way into those companies as a foreigner if you know the right people, like everywhere in the world. If you have connections, somehow you make it work. But still, one thing that has to be said is that the degree of localizations, like local staff taking over, like this China plus one principle, like the Singaporeans, Malaysians, is also increasing. So this is like two different trends. And also, what one also has to say is that like these big expert packages are also not entirely dead yet. So there's
Mm-hmm.
still companies sending experts over. It's now more younger experts, less so the big families and so on and so forth.
I mean,
Um,
schooling is quite expensive and so on.
exactly. So that's an economic decision for the company. Do they now want to send an executive with 4 children, where they have like easily 1 million RMB a year and just in schooling fees, or is it the younger unmarried guy who would then like what coming back to the discussion before, having the time of his life in Shanghai and maybe even setting up a family over here, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
an interesting thing. So, but still, put it down to one aspect, I would say it's the networking.
Do you know if there's any specific industries or what type of companies would still send expats abroad now? Or is that difficult to say?
Well, I see that well, I'm seeing that in many different industries because a lot of companies over the years they kind of, I wouldn't say lost control of their subsidiaries, but they kind of want to have a little bit more of an oversight what's happening on the ground in China. I mean, almost daily you hear some cases where people are doing whatever. I mean, you know how China works sometimes. So
Yeah.
then of course people that companies are keen to look what's happening on the ground, get boots on the ground. So this is definitely still something happening all across the board. But it's less so. I think the generalists is much more the specialists that are that over now.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got to be a specialist. What do you think is the future of foreign companies in China, like, or let's talk specifically about automotive companies. I mean, the Chinese competition and with EV, it's pretty big. Like, how do you predict German automotive in China or even in the world?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of news coverage saying, okay, German automotive is dead. I don't believe that. I think a lot of the companies that I see are like using China a little bit as a gym in order to keep up with the Joneses, to really educate themselves, look at the concepts that are happening here. And one has to really say, I mean, the Chinese EV market is the most advanced EV market in the world, but I really had this end-to-end approach from like coming up with new vehicle concepts and thinking really about vehicles being that kind of third living space, like fridges, massage seats, Nintendo Switch integrations, like really catering towards this modern Chinese family. And I see a lot of manufacturers, and not just the German ones, but also the Japanese ones, and everybody kind of taking note, like being busy. Okay, we look what the Chinese are doing, and I think in a few years you see that's a global thing, but then suddenly those concepts are somewhat applied to other markets, and it can be an opportunity as well. Of course, it's challenging. The times of being market leaders for all international automotives is kind of over in China, but still a good time to learn and keep up your innovating spirit.
That's a good point because we don't want to get disrupted. And in China, everything is so fast moving. Even if not the quality is like 100% perfect, because sometimes they are very fast, right? In Germany, we're a little bit slower. But how can we keep up with this innovation? I mean, this is your field of expertise.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is what Chinese do very well is this incremental innovation aspect. So they take, let's say, very advanced concepts from the States. I mean, you know, the States, they're like disruptive innovation leader almost to some extent.
Silicon Valley approach,
Exactly,
agile, lean.
exactly, and like or even now some European companies as well.
Yeah.
And then they really refine those concepts in a like mind-boggling speed, basically, like very fast iterations. And then suddenly, like in 6 months' time, you have something completely else that has continuously incrementally innovated. Now, that way, I think they all can really go and learn from what the Chinese are doing, and a lot of people, a lot of companies are doing that in whatever sector. I mean, a lot of GMs I talk to, they have their innovation teams on the ground, and then learn from it and see how to apply it into foreign markets, basically.
Now, you are extremely creative, and with your background and expertise, has it ever crossed your mind to become an entrepreneur, quit the corporate world? Because like last week, I just interviewed a former colleague of mine
Mm,
from HP in Finland, and he has been like inside HP or former HP entities and at Siemens and in the corporate world for 30 years. And now he's like in the beginning of his 50s,
mm.
started his own company. Now, what about you?
Well, it's definitely on the radar. Let's to say it like this. To be honest, I first wanted to get my 5 years, which I now did, under my belt to kind of get a lot of expertise. Yeah, thank you, thank you. They even gave me a removal suitcase for that.
Wow.
Anyway, so I first wanted to get that under the belt to kind of get a lot of experience because I kind of back then thought, okay, if I'm a young kind of 25-year-old guy want to set up a startup, I might not have the necessary resources or the skill set to really come up with something. Of course, the stories of Silicon Valley are long, where you have like the young founders and
Mhm.
becoming billionaires, but it's still hard, that game.
Oh, I
And
agree.
that's why I thought always to learn a lot about certain fields and then
And get savings on the side?
get savings on the side. But also now what I do a lot is to network with the overall startup scene. So I work with German Accelerator on startup mentoring. Like a lot of times, it's a daily habit. I talk during my lunch break to people on Zoom, or I'll try to learn something new and then trying to further accelerate this kind of career growth or this general network. And then let's see, maybe at some point there will be a good time to finally make the leap once I've figured out what exactly to do. I mean, I'm still in the stage of doing that, but I mean, a lot of conditions nowadays point me a little bit that maybe in a few years there will be something like a perfect storm
Mm.
to really make something happen.
Yeah. I mean, I was in corporate with HP for more than 6 years, but because I
Mm.
came to China through my master's degree, I did not have that many, actually no savings on the side.
Yeah,
So that's definitely something I would do differently if I had to start all over again. And also,
yeah.
I probably wouldn't start in Shanghai, but in Shenzhen or in the south, because of different reasons. But wow, I can't wait to see like how this is going to
Yeah.
continue.
I mean, as a foreign founder in China, one also has to be mindful that it can work. I mean, if you have the right partner, it can work, but it's sometimes a bit harder than you would have it in other countries where you have, let's say, easier regulatory frameworks, less gray areas, more black and white. You know what you get basically.
Mm,
So it has
like
pros
the
and cons.
language
Yeah,
barriers or so.
exactly. Cultural barrier. I mean,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. So let's move on to the next question. What do you think is the key to happiness? Because I always want to like see how do people become
Mm.
successful? How do they think? But nobody really talks about happiness and well-being. So what's the key to happiness? What do you think?
For me, the key to happiness is a clear structure.
Clear structure. I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
I love that. Tell
I
me
know,
more.
I know that sounds very German.
Very German, yeah?
Like I need to have my plan from A to B. No, but I like that kind of approach to set myself a plan, even if it's a plan for the day, where I go ahead and in the morning while I make my bed. So what are my goals for the day? What do I want to achieve? Looking forward to something, and these kind of things that help you to go through the day and like even at work if you encounter problems like you need a structure like whatever problems may be to really distill it down to the essence and then like piece by piece go through the structure and in the end like solve it, you know. And I've found it very fitting for my overall life to have
Mm.
always a structure to look forward to. That doesn't mean that I'm not living in the moment, but still to uh, really use what I have to the best possible effect.
I loved it. I mean, you said structure is a key to your happiness, but I would also see that it's a key to your success because that goes back to my earlier question. Like,
Mm.
how are you able to manage your wife, your child, your job, like all these mentoring and other activities
Yeah,
next to it?
yeah.
Do you have a specific app or specific template that you could recommend us or specific habit how exactly you do that structure and what you just mentioned with the goal setting and
Yeah, I mean, let's take it with my wife. We have a calendar, joint calendar. Like, I put calendar events in there, and then like for the holidays we have spreadsheets.
oh.
And
All
and
digitalized or like written down at home?
digitalized. You know, Google Docs, easily accessible on the phone, and then you go through, and let's say you have a budget spreadsheet, you have a spreadsheet where you want to be at what day and whatsoever. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
This is what we do. And I think structure, what we also do a lot is weekly check-ins.
What are weekly check-ins for you? This sounds so work. That's such a work term,
Yeah.
right? Like jour fixe, and but we're talking about your wife now.
Nah, this is a weekly thing where we discuss what's up and like frank communication. I'm again very German. You tell each other what you didn't like about the week, and then you work on it to improve it basically.
Okay, wow, this is a really good advice. Thank you so much. Now, as a global citizen, how does culture shape or influence your life or work? Because I know you also have something like about Australia. You also have another citizenship.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing was for me, in Germany I did some mini jobs where I worked in the fashion industry. But
Oh,
then,
really?
Anyway,
Were you a model?
no, I sold women's handbags.
Okay.
But anyway, so where did I want to go with that? I actually my whole career I spent in China. Like my first full-time job was literally China in like a gaming company. So all I've known for the first 5 years was basically working 996. Like working in that.
You got to say what 996 is.
Yeah,
Some people may not know.
exactly. I mean, 996 is just kind of 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. 6 days a week, and that was the typical work rhythm, and that's all I've known. So I've known like this Chinese startup corporate culture, like even the politics in there, and like this kind of wolf culture, even to some extent. And then funny was for me, like when I joined now more than 5 years ago, suddenly I was in a German work environment, and that was obviously very interesting for me. Like the formalities, you have to greet somebody in the formal way, and struggled a bit with that from a general coming from the general startup mindset. So that was again like a little bit culture clash. Where over the years already I got a little bit more Chinese from a working style, a Chinese startup entrepreneur like. Now, what is interesting, like I kind of took the best of both worlds. I still work a lot for, but it's also like very Germanic in the culture, like very frank feedback and
very direct.
Very direct. If something goes wrong, you tell people to their face, which sometimes is not easy for people. So this is interesting, and now what you said that Australia gets more interesting because I mean then being at home with a Australian wife and having like more Australian or British friends and so on. Again, it gets very internationalized. So less so this German culture, but more like the Australian lingo and the Australian jokes and another culture in the mix kind of. So I wouldn't place myself now in any kind of box, people like to put people in boxes, but I'm a little bit more cosmopolitan now.
Amazing.
Internationalized.
All right, it got a little bit chilly outside, so we're back in the cafe.
Yes.
We spoke about culture, and I'm wondering now, as a global citizen yourself and having a mixed child, let's talk about languages. How do you raise your child in which language? Because I remember I had these friends, and I thought, wow, they were like role models. So they knew each other from Switzerland. I met them at a conference in the US when I just moved to China. So soon after, they also moved to China, but she was Malaysian, so she spoke English with the children. Her husband was French, but remember they lived in German-speaking Switzerland.
Yeah.
So the children basically were raised in in English, French, but they went to a Swiss school, so spoke Swiss German. And because they came to China, the nanny spoke Chinese, and they were only like 5 and 7 years old at that time and spoke 4 languages.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter basically she will grow up also with 3 languages. So I try to talk to her a little bit more in German. Because at this age, it's a lot of like, not necessarily like complex sentences that a child can understand. My wife speaks to her in English, and then our nanny I speaks to her in Chinese. So like when we just were in Australia, it was funny. Like we played a little bit with baby. Like she talked to her in Chinese, I talked to her in Chinese. She understood it, acted accordingly. Then I talked to her in German. She understood it, and then my wife talked to her in English, and she also understood it again. So again, very kind of international, not cultural. Of course, This being said, I'm still being mindful. Like German is not an easy language to learn, so I think in a few years we need to like work a little bit on like I don't know, getting German OKRs or getting the tutoring going, so that really the skills are there in the end. Because otherwise, the grammar like is not that easy to be easily applied.
Yeah.
Or let's say summers with my family in Germany, just like the baby or the child there, and then there's like German immersion program or whatever.
Yeah. So, what's a life or business advice you wish you would have gotten at an earlier stage?
There's always a solution.
There's always a solution.
There is,
This is something I actually learned more in China than in Germany, because there's always like, because it's not black and white. We're in Germany, here it's gray. In Germany, it's yes or no, black or white.
Yeah, but not necessarily that. I mean, if you're starting up in a job and sometimes you feel like problems are massive, and how can you surmount the problems basically? And this comes along, and you're like, okay, yeah, I can find a solution. Of course, there's this kind of like you can fix almost everything, like calling some people, paying somebody, whatsoever. I think that thing goes through globally. I actually got to that point, like learning that sentence, but when my aunt told me her story when she was with her young baby boy and her young daughter, like having her maternity leave in Thailand. So she took time off from work, and then suddenly her credit card got swallowed in the ATM machine, and she was like, didn't have food and whatsoever. And then there was this English guy telling her, no worries, there's always a solution, and they fixed it in the end. And she told me the story, and it kind of stuck with me.
I like it, and it also shows that Johannes has a growth mindset. Now, what do you think is the most powerful question a successful business leader should ask themselves? You knowing that I'm a coach, we always like to ask questions, right? Because sometimes we cannot find answers if we don't ask the right questions.
Yeah, I think important. I read this book the other day from a friend of mine called Jacob Johansen. He's a PwC strategy and innovation consultant for like a Greater China, a little bit APAC as well. And so he wrote this book about how to convert a customer to a user. Because in the end, a customer is like one purchase, like one transaction, and then you don't care about the customer anymore. Like very limited interaction, but then the user of your product, they really have multiple interaction points, and then you even can down the line basically create additional value with that, and really think about this user-centric mindset, like what is the best thing for the user, what is the best experience for the user. And that also means like a management, like wherever they are, like, as soon as you have some whatever user involved with your product, they should always put themselves directly into the shoes, what the users want. And maybe it doesn't necessarily mean that the user wants something, so we create something, but maybe even creating a user needs.
I like that.
So like I mean, some users, I don't know, they want crazy things, and then sometimes they're not sensible, and then you come up with something completely new, and then you're like, oh yeah, I didn't know that I needed that, but it's great. I mean, same what Steve Jobs did back then with the iPhone.
Yeah.
Like everybody was like, okay, yeah, why not? Yeah. He came across, and suddenly people were like, okay, didn't know I needed that, but it's great, you know?
Yeah. Now, one more thing that it pops up in my mind. Earlier, you mentioned like the next China is still somehow China, but what is the next China after China? Because I actually also know Chinese manufacturers who are currently leaving to Vietnam, to Thailand. What is the next China beyond of China? And we said we still have potential here.
Yeah, I mean, you see, like what you said, Chinese manufacturers moving abroad, that's the thing. For them, very often, like everybody talks about this Chinese word Yuan. It's kind of hyper competition that you have in the Chinese market, where it's almost like a zero-sum game. Okay, either you kill the other manufacturer or you won't survive.
Oh.
No, like this competition anymore that you used to have a few years ago. And now, obviously, these other markets are very appealing for them because they're like interesting growth revenues and so on and so forth. So that might be a thing, but then of course you see the other markets like you see other markets that are like India that are having good growth trajectories, and also talking about manufacturing in a lot of other countries, even Western countries. They still have a lot of manufacturing plants, basically, like to basically establish new manufacturing plants, and like Australia is one example of the National Reconstruction Fund, where just simply set up this like 15 billion Australian dollar fund just to have advanced manufacturing back into the region. So like there's multiple China. Like it still might not be like the overall market size of you have in China, but so if you do a right diversification strategy, that still makes sense.
Yeah, I just spoke with a friend. He's German Turkish, and he works in the solar industry, and was telling me that actually in Turkey, it should be quite affordable right now to build up their production, and so that's another option. Yeah. Okay, last question for today, because I know the lunch break's over. Your next appointment is waiting.
Exactly.
Why did you decide to take the time and have this podcast with me?
Well, I look heavily into personal branding right now to kind of, I wouldn't say monetize my China story, but more bring it across, because I mean it's a diverse story. There's many people who have similar stories, of course, out there, but who sometimes fail to get their message across, and you have the hawks and the rest of the world who are like, China is shit, or you have the people who are like all about I love China, and I don't know, but I think it always is missing a little bit of a more nuanced approach, where there's not just black and white, but there's somewhere also a gray balance. This is something, of course, I want to do, and what you said earlier, this kind of career growth and looking into opportunities, meeting new people, getting to know people. Who knows, maybe something will come across. You know?
I love that. And I think especially nowadays, we ask ourselves, or we're afraid to lose our jobs, or how do we stay competitive? So even if you have your safe corporate job, or you think you're going to stay there till the end of your life or till retirement, you never know what may happen. Exactly. So really work on your own brand, get yourself out there. So thanks for the inspiration. Thanks for being with us, Johannes.
My pleasure.
And guys, I hope you liked today's session. Follow Johannes, connect with him. He is amazing, as you could see. He has amazing stories to tell, great expertise. And see you for the next pod. Take care.